We're gonna pray that Jesus be
Yes, a
with
router.
Wi-Fi for the both of us.
Please, please, Lord, do it right now.
Right now. Just to add something though, Michelle, the enduring word commentary. I know you sent it to me through email before. I was like, that's what I use. That's my go-to.
Yeah,
Um, it breaks it down in a way that challenges, your perception of how you think the scripture should be or what it means. It definitely challenges mine all the time. I start reading, I'm like, that's not what I thought that meant. You
yeah.
know.
This, this story is interesting, and we'll talk about it. But I felt like I was reading, like it doesn't feel normal. It feels different.
Mm,
And I don't
yeah.
know if it's just based on the amount of study I did or maybe the season that we're in, but I felt like I got some really strong revelations
Wow.
that I'm hopeful, we can share and then apply, right? Because that's the point of our Bible study. So, yeah, I'm excited.
Absolutely. There's someone who asked, would there be a replay? Absolutely. It's always our Bible studies are always left up for anybody who likes to go back and watch. So it will be here.
Hey, Miss Shirley.
Hey, Auntie.
She like, we need to get her a t-shirt. We need a Faith First t-shirt.
For sure. We'll make that happen.
Okay, whenever you want. You want me to start?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Okay, friends, welcome back to, I don't even know which week now, Faith First, our virtual Bible study. Super excited for this week. If you've joined us again in our Facebook group, or maybe you've seen our posts, this week we're talking about Queen Esther, and we are really excited about it. This week's study is Esther chapter 4, verses 13 through 14. And let me make sure that I'm quoting that correctly. Yes. I got a little carried away and I've actually studied the entire book. I was just telling Tori, I've read the Hebrew version and the Greek version. So I feel well equipped to have this discussion tonight. And yeah, so Tori, I don't know if you want to kick us off and kind of give us a little bit of a background as to what we talked about last week with Bishop, who was an amazing guest.
Sure. So last week we studied from the story of the Good Samaritan. And the two things we talked about, the theme was these two. And it's loving God with everything, our hearts, our minds, our spirit, all our strength. And then loving our neighbors as ourselves. And one of the key questions asked from that story is from the lawyer who asks, well, who is my neighbor? Jesus goes on to tell this great story parable. And in the end, it basically tells us our neighbor, it crosses ethnicities, cultural backgrounds. It's not people who just look like us, talk like us, or who think like us. It's anybody who's in need, who needs our mercy, who needs care, who needs our voice if it's necessary. That is who our neighbor is. And so that's what we talked about on last week.
Yes. So, like Tori said, we talked about the love of God and the love of our neighbor. So this week we are still talking about love. I want you to kind of tuck away anything that you've learned about Esther in the past, because I feel like you're going to get some new learning. And so I'm excited to share them. But what I want to do before we get right into the word, I'm going to try to give you the Cliff Notes version of what happens in the story up until this point, right? Okay, so if you're in your Bible, Esther is an Old Testament chapter. And interestingly enough, scholars believe that it is one of the texts that is based on fiction. So the belief is loosely, it's kind of one of those, you know how you have those movies that are based on a true story? Well, let's just say Esther is kind of the same way. There are some players within the story who run parallel to other parts or other players in actual Bible stories. And so, yeah, I just wanted to set that up because I think sometimes, you know, we trust the word. Lord knows we do, but we also need to understand where the word and the text were constructed and how they were constructed and what places they play in the total Bible story. So we're talking about Queen Esther. Now, what you might not know is that Queen Esther didn't start out as a queen. So if you've never studied this text, you might not know that she was actually an orphan. And so she was orphaned after her husband passed away. And so she went and was taken with her cousin Mordecai, who is an important figure in this story as well. And they are living as Jews in a land of Gentiles. They are under the rule of King Xerxes. There are lots of different ways to say his name, lots of different namings. But I'll just say that it's important to understand that they are Jews, in fact, living in a Gentile led land. And so, what sets Esther up for her ascension to take on the role as queen is Queen Vashti, who had been summoned by King Xerxes, decided that she wasn't going to come when he called. And so, what that set into motion is this, I guess you could call it a law. Maybe it was more so a policy that no one could enter the king's courts without permission from him. And he actually had uh, to basically hold out his golden scepter as a visual to you to say, yes, you are welcome into my space. Um, and Vashti's disobedience essentially again set into motion this plan or this opportunity for Esther to even become queen. And once she is chosen by one of the king's eunuchs or his, I guess you could call him a servant, loosely a servant, more so like an armor bearer. But Esther is chosen because she's gorgeous. And so when she's chosen, Mordecai tells her not to share her roots. So from the jump, Esther is told not to share that she's Jewish. Now, I remind you, they are Jews. They are members of the Jewish diaspora, and they are living in a land where they are the minority. That's important. So don't miss that. And so Esther, as she's chosen, goes into the palace, lives in the palace, becoming Queen Esther. And then that is where we find this story. And so I wanted to give all of that background because I think that sometimes we miss that. And I hear, Tori, I'm sure you know, we hear this scripture, this particular scripture, these two verses quoted a lot. You know, you were born for such a time as this. You know, this is your time. This is your time. And we
Yeah.
don't really understand the fullness of that and how powerful it is considering all of the things I just talked about. So
Right.
so yeah, again, remember that they are Jews living in a Gentile led land. And now Esther is going into the palace where, you know, she is a Jew living in a Gentile palace. So I'm trying to make sure that those are all the details that you have. Tori, can you think of anything that maybe I missed up until this point that's important for the audience to know? I think I covered.
Yeah, you hit all the points. An orphan
Okay.
Jew.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, one other thing is that there was also some beef. So, you know, you can't have a good Bible story without some beef. So, Mordecai, who is, as I told you, we can call him, for the purposes of this study, we can call him Esther's godfather, right? Because he did essentially take her in. They were relatives, they were cousins. And so Mordecai took her in after she was orphaned. Mordecai served in the king's court as well. He had a place in the king's court, although he was a Jew. But what's interesting is he ends up finding beef or having beef with Haman, who eventually becomes second in command to King Xerxes. And so, he has an ear to the king, Haman does. And so he feels like Mordecai is kind of like overstepping some boundaries, right?
Yep.
And another thing that's important to note, again, lots of background. I hope y'all are able to keep up. Um, Another thing that's important to point out is that Mordecai is a very open Jew. So he's open about his practice, and he's, I guess we could say he was a very faithful Jew, meaning that, devout is the word that I was looking for, devout. So you got this devout Jew over here, Mordecai, who's serving in the king's court. And then you have Haman, who's the second in command to the king, who doesn't like the fact that Mordecai is getting some shine. And essentially, that's what was happening. So all of that to say, right, we zoom through chapter 1, we zoom through chapter 2, chapter 3, and we get to chapter 4. And at the beginning of chapter 4, Mordecai is having what I would assume anyone would have after they find out that there is a war on their people. And so, Mordecai finds out that Haman is planning to, I mean, it's mass persecution. I would even maybe say it's genocide.
It
Um,
is.
a Jewish genocide across all of the territories under King Xerxes' rule. And so, as someone who's serving in the court, a very devout Jew, he's troubled. And we meet him at the beginning of chapter 4 in his mourning clothes, which we know, if you study the Bible to any length, that is burlap and ashes, sackcloth. And so, he was outwardly distraught about what he had heard and what he had learned about Haman's plans. Tori, do you have any thoughts just about, where we meet Mordecai at the beginning of chapter 4 and knowing what we know about how they get here? Like, do you have any thoughts on why it got so bad?
When you say why it got so bad, what, as far as for Mordecai, the way he was mourning, or how
No,
fast it
more
went with him and
so.
Haman?
Yeah, like how did you say Haman? I'm gonna say that too. How Haman got to the point that he would hate the Jews so much that he would call for, this mass genocide.
Yeah, I mean, reading it, you see that, and we see that repeated time and time again throughout history, right? And you go like, wow, like really, your hate for one person would send it that far that you just want to kill them all, wipe them
Yeah,
all out. It sounds much like Adolf Hitler. Sounds a lot like a lot of things we've read and we hear in history. It even sounds like things that we experience on a day-to-day basis. So just the fact that off rip that we can connect to that idea, right? That somebody would hate one person so bad
yeah.
that they would want to rid of an entire
Mhm.
race of people or religion because I hate you, right? I think that is powerful. And in the fact that that one man caused so much trouble and how powerful it is that that one woman can make so much change.
Yes. Oh, that's good. That's a really good maybe even transition into the text. So like we said, we're talking about Esther, and we're starting for the purposes of this study in chapter 4, verse 13. And so I am going to read verse 13 and 14 in case you aren't in front of a Bible or don't have access right now, just so you hear it and you'll know kind of where it's toward our conversation. So again, Esther chapter 4, verse 13 says, when they told Mordecai, 13 says, Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, do not think that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at such a time as this, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another quarter, but you and your father's family will perish. For you will come to royal dignity for such a time as this. What's important to know about these particular scriptures is that we said Mordecai is out in the courts and he's in his mourning clothes, right? He's in
Right.
full mourning regalia. And so Esther's like, whoa, dude, you need to chill out. What's going on?
Yeah.
And she sends her helper to go out and to say, like, hey, what's going on? And then Mordecai sends her a message to tell her what's going on. And um, what's so interesting about this, like Tori said, is that one decision, how, you have one man who's declaring war on all these people, and then you have one woman who's in just the right place to fix it. And it reminds me we have to be vigilant when we are in a place of privilege. And if we think about it, right, um, Esther is very much in a place of privilege. I already told you, she's a Jew living in a Gentile palace, living in a Gentile-led land, and now she's the queen, which means that even if she doesn't have access to him all the time, she has access to the king. And that's far more than probably most of her people have. And what Mordecai is saying, as he's saying, maybe your time is this, he's not just talking about, her being queen so she can tell the king not to kill Jews, but she has an opportunity to change the entire trajectory of her people. And
Yeah.
if you read the rest of the story, that's exactly what she does, right? She doesn't just foil Haman's plan, but essentially her courage gives room for her to make this declaration to Jews all over the land that you are free and you really can do your own thing. Like King Xerxes allowed them to live and obey their own set of laws. And I don't know that I've ever heard or read any case in current day where people have been allowed to live in a space but obey a different set of laws. And while this story centers around Esther, I think it's also important for us to, talk about the faith that Mordecai must have had for him to even tell her to go and do this. Because he even, he says, whether you agree to this or not, we gonna be good. So, if you decide that you're not gonna say nothing, the Jews gonna be fine, but it's gonna be your people, meaning
That's
her
bold.
lineage, right? Her
Yeah.
ancestry, all those people tied to her and whatever legacy she decides to leave, they'll
Yeah.
be destroyed. But over here, we gonna be good. And Tori, I don't know if you have thoughts on that, but it's just powerful. Like that part is powerful.
No, I think that's very bold, right? Like if you put it like in present times and you hear that line in a movie, you'll go, wait a minute, what?
Yeah.
Like we gonna be all right. We want you to do it, but just in case you don't, right?
Mhm.
Our faith is totally in God. We believe
Yeah.
that God can use you to do it, but if you choose not to, He's still gonna take care of us, right?
Yeah.
I think Esther looks like a lot of us who are in privilege, who we feel like we're insulated from the problems that other people face, right?
Hmm.
And to forget that, I think it was mentioned, if we don't take care of the least, right, you're next.
Yeah.
So the idea that I can just overlook something and I'm going to be okay, here, Mordecai is saying, no, you know what, you can act like you don't see it. You cannot say anything about it, but that's not going to save you.
Right. Right.
And I thought that was incredibly, just a powerful statement.
Yeah. It definitely is. And I think what it did for me, in this season, I feel like God has really been humbling me. I think He's probably humbling a lot of us, but
Yeah.
humbling me in a way that like just really showing me to always stay tuned to the people that I'm connected to not lose sight of where I come from,
Mm.
be that geographically, be that ancestrally, genetically, religiously, whatever. Don't leave anybody behind. And so, what's funny about it is we're talking here about this proverbial palace, but many of us have our own proverbial palaces that we've built because of what we've accomplished, what we feel like we've done for ourselves, the lives that we've made for our families, maybe the kinds of careers we have, the cars we drive, right? We build these pillars and these palaces for ourselves to say, oh, well, I'm not like, I might look like them, but I'm not really part of them anymore. And I'm not
Mm-hmm.
saying that Esther did that, but she had the opportunity to, right? Because to
Yeah.
your point, she was very much insulated. And so, it's really important for us to never lose sight, like you said, like we've said, of who we're connected to, because at the end of the day, we still have something in common, right? And
Yeah.
it's important, especially in times like these, for us not to forget the least of those, because
Yeah.
if they're being mistreated, then there could be a cue to us that could be that it could be us, and the positions could easily be swapped. So that privilege is important. And as we talk about privilege current day, this is a great application to think about and sit with yourself to figure out, what kinds of privilege do I have? Because we all have some,
Yeah.
right? It's not just about white privilege, but it's class privilege. It's about educational privilege, financial privilege. Like, there are just so many layers.
Yeah.
And it's important for us, again, to have conversations that continue to highlight where we may have blind spots because we no longer have certain struggles, and to
Mm-hmm.
open up ourselves to be advocates for people when we can. Um, yeah, so I'm trying to think, like, where else do we want to go with this? It's just, oh, it's so rich. One thing I wanted to point out with Esther was that she had been passive up until this point, right? She was like, I'm living in a palace. I have handmaids. I'm eating. For 30 days, that's fine. Um, but interestingly enough, Mordecai's push is what kind of like gave her maybe the courage,
Mm-hmm.
um, the the faith, maybe even that she needed
Mm-hmm.
to step up.
Yeah. Just to add something, just to add, what you mentioned earlier about him being out making such a spectacle of himself, right? Mourning and just is what brought attention to it, right? And a lot of times we see people who are crying out and we're like,
Yes.
stop making a fool out of yourself. But somebody has to cry out, right? So there's someone who's in a position who will see that and acknowledge it. Because if we just sit idle and quiet, then there are people who, like to Esther, who's insulated, who not that they don't care, they just don't know.
Yeah.
They're not aware. So it's upon us to make people aware, to raise awareness, right? And I think that's what Mordecai was doing,
Hmm.
raising awareness. Because had he not done that, Esther may would have never known about the decree and what was getting ready to take place. So
Yeah.
it was that mourning was necessary. And I think for a lot of us, two things we should know: mourning is okay. It's okay to mourn, right? It's a part of it's God has given us that emotion for a reason, right? So cry it out, get it out, but then it has to have a purpose afterwards, right? What is the purpose behind it? Like when you finish crying, like what's gonna happen next? I think there's a story in Samuel when the Lord asks, "How long are you gonna mourn?"
Mm.
Right before you get up and do something. Like how long are we gonna mourn? So it's good to mourn. It has a it has to have a purpose. But how long are we just gonna mourn and cry about what we see taking place in our neighborhoods, in our churches, in government? How long are we just gonna mourn? Like when are we gonna get up and move, as you said in the theme, right?
Yeah.
Like when it has to have a stopping point, right? It's okay to do it, but then it has to have a purpose.
Yes. 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 That's definitely so. This week's theme, everyone. I'm sorry if I didn't say it, but it is: will you move or will you mourn? And it's kind of it's a rhetorical question, but it's also a trick question, right? Because, like Tori said, I believe that we can do both. There's a time for everything, right? There's a time to mourn and there's a time to rejoice. There's a time to mourn and there's a time to move. And so it's fine for you to feel the feelings of whatever you're feeling in the moment, but it's also important not to get bogged down in the morning and lose sight of the fact that you still have to move, right?
Hmm.
Because believers should know that we are more than conquerors and that God has given us the spirit of power and of sonship. So if we have those things, then we should know that we have what we need in order to declare victory. And as we talk about, Esther and thinking about Mordecai, yes, he made a fool of himself, but clearly he got his message across. And I think that, this also ties to lots of conversations happening right now about the ways people are or are not protesting. It's important to know that there's a space and a place for everybody. And whatever your act of rebellion or your act of um, protest is, like, that's still powerful. It still has a place. And so let's
Yeah,
not lose sight of the root causes of these things. Let's focus on the fact that everybody everywhere is doing a little bit or doing their part to do something. And I think what Mordecai realized is that if there was anyone who was going to save the Jews, it was going to be Esther, because she had the ear to the king. And so, yes, she had to step out on faith because, as I mentioned earlier, Vashti messed it up for everybody. So no
everybody.
longer could the queens come and just, kick it in the royal court in the inner queen. They had to be summoned by him. He had to call for them and say, I just went to see him. He's not going to call me again. But guess what she did? She did it anyway. And that's it's powerful, but it's also important to know that she hesitated for a minute. Like, so not only was she passive, but she kind of pushed back. She was like, whoa, what do you mean? What are you calling me to do? I just was there. Like, you're not about to have me, in trouble with the king. Um, but she did it anyway. And that's what it's about, right? It's about taking whatever privilege we have to use it to free our people in whatever ways we can. And I think we get caught up on, like, well, I'm going to get in trouble, or what about me? But it's like, I would rather, or we should rather sacrifice our own egos, our pride, maybe our comfort,
Yeah,
so that we can save others, versus sitting on the sideline and mourning them after the fact. Like, if she hadn't stepped in, like Mordecai said, they were going to be fine. They would be saved some other way. The Lord would have intervened. But if
yeah,
you step in right now, it's going to be your lineage that's going to be destroyed. And so she
right.
was like, whoa, maybe I should rethink about this. I should rethink this. And it goes back to what we said, Tori, about, just remembering who we're connected to, because I do believe that every one of us is connected to the fate of all of us. So if we sit back and we watch people being unjustly killed, unjustly shot, unjustly whatever, convicted of crimes, unjustly, negligent, I feel like that could happen to any of us. Like, we talk often, like, you have a brother, I don't have a brother, but I have plenty of play brothers. I have cousins, I have uncles, we have fathers.
Yeah,
There are things for us to think about. On the flip side of that, it could be us. Like, Breonna Taylor could have been us. So it's really
absolutely.
important for us to remember that with just one one thing can be different and it could be shoes. So don't get so high in that palace that you think that you're insulated and that um, you don't have a voice, but also that you don't have a place in the struggle, because you do. We all do.
Yeah. Something to add to that, Michelle, is you said something along the lines of, and Mordecai was talking to her like, that's almost like, who, me? Like, you want me to go in there and do that? And I think that's a lot of us, right? I've been guilty, like, who, me, God? You want me to speak up and say something? Yes, you. He wants you to do it, right? No matter what your position is. Like, you may not be the head of a government. You may not be a mayor or a sheriff or whatever, but your voice is still powerful.
Mm-hmm.
We just have to open our mouths so we can be heard. But as long as you question, can I, always hesitant, then
Yeah.
you'll never know. But
Yeah.
the important part, back to Mordecai, you may not do it, but God is still gonna come through and take care of His people, right? So why
Yeah.
not let it be you? Because He is faithful, right? He has already made us victorious. Just move. I think a few weeks ago we talked about moving your feet. Move your feet. And just, I think a lot of times we think so less of ourselves.
We
We
do.
say, we just feel like we're powerless. But here it is. I feel like God is showing us that through Mordecai, one person, right, reaching out and impacting Esther, one woman, that makes the difference.
Yeah.
He only needs one.
Hmm.
And how incredible is that if we allow ourselves to be that one?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, and that one, like, this is a huge deal, right? This is one woman making a decision that will impact generations of people, but also thousands upon thousands of people across all these provinces that are under the rule of King Xerxes. So we get it, right? It's a big one. This is a big one. But there are other opportunities for the power of one to be shown in our own lives, like the
Mm-hmm.
small things, our decisions that we make day to day. Those exemplify and show the power of one, the power of Tori, one person to say, let's start a virtual Bible study. That's how we started this, right? The power of one person to say, let's take over these or let's start prayer calls, right? There's so many ways for us to make an impact. And to your point, Tori, I think that we think so little, and not only do we think little of ourselves, but I think we think little of how much God can do for us or through
Mm-hmm.
us,
Yeah,
right?
that's good.
So it's not so
Yeah.
much that we feel like, or I do think we feel inadequate, but it also goes to how big we think God is. So if we
Yeah.
think that God is a small God, then we think, oh, I can't do that. Or maybe we think what we're asking Him is too big, and that's
Yeah.
still thinking that God is a small God. And so we have to check ourselves and really, really take off those blinders that I was talking about and realize that God is the creator of the universe. He set the stars and the planets into orbit. He formed you in your mother's womb. Why wouldn't he support you on an endeavor that he's calling you to? Right? I don't believe that, fiction or nonfiction, I don't think that Esther was put in this position by accident, right? It was for a divine purpose. And I think that more than anything, what this story shows us is that it's important to stay connected to who you are and stay connected to who made you. Because when you do that, you're able to kind of tune out the distractions that are telling you what you aren't. And
Mm.
instead, you're tapping into what you are. And that's more than a conqueror. Fearfully and wonderfully made. You know what I mean? You have the power of God on your life. And the
Yeah.
Holy Spirit rests and abides in us, those who invite it in. And so we just have to be mindful of canceling our assignment because we can't believe it in the first place.
Oh, that's powerful, Michelle. That's
I've
powerful.
I've done it. It's like I'm speaking to myself because I've done it before. Yeah, you don't want to cancel your assignment because what it does is it sets you back.
Mm-hmm.
And not only does it set you back, but we've talked about this before, Tori, is what's connected, or the people, the souls
Yeah.
who are
Yeah.
connected
Yeah.
to your obedience, right? So
Yeah.
if I say, no, I'm not going to do that, then who out there is still going to be fending for themselves or in
Mm-hmm.
turmoil because I said no? And
Yeah.
I don't want to be living with nobody else's baggage because Lord knows I got enough of my own.
No, yeah, I mean that's so powerful. You know, again, going back to Esther, she could say, "Oh, I'm an orphan. I'm a Jew. I'm this. I'm that." You know,
Yeah.
all the excuses in the world as to why we can't do it. I'm black. I'm young. I'm a woman. You know, or in case I'm white, they're not gonna listen to me or whatever it is, right?
Mhm.
Or I'm this religion. It does not matter
Yeah.
when God has set you in a place or given you an assignment. He's gonna make sure it comes through and it works out, right? This is on him. I think a lot of times we look at stuff and we try to carry it like it's on us. Like, no, like this is on God. Like a lot of times when I've done stuff, Michelle, and I'm getting nervous, I'm like, well, God, this is your thing. So I know you're gonna have to show up. So and that's how we have to look at this is God's thing, right? So he's
Agree.
gonna make sure, he's gonna make sure that whatever it is, the whatever the intent that is going to be accomplished. And like you were just saying, and if we don't, then we risk putting people's lives at risk.
Yeah.
And not that God is not going to come save or set somebody up eventually, but it may be we prolong the time where it
Hmm.
could have been done today. Now
Yeah.
we wait 20 years. Now we wait 10 years. Now we wait whatever it is, we are prolonging it where we could have saved somebody today. And so if we don't, we lose lives in the midst of waiting for the next person to choose to step up.
Yeah.
And that within itself, like going back, it's so powerful, so powerful how our decisions affect so many other people.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're talking about in this instance, godly decisions, right? So if I decide that I'm not going to speak up, that's a decision still. And
Hmm.
so what that means is that whoever those impacted folks are, I could have intervened. And honestly, I would rather intervene and deal with whatever comes with that versus not intervening and knowing I could have done something. Like, I don't know, you see a group of kids and you see them doing something they don't have any business doing. And instead of you doing something or saying something about it, you let them go. Next thing you know, like, one of them is arrested or something. Like, those are actionable things that we can be doing right now. And if we really, the thing could really be the power of one, because in so many ways, there are these micro stories.
Hmm.
Haman is a story of one, right? He was one
Hmm.
person who started out on his whole little journey because I think in his mind, he wanted not only to be second in command to King Xerxes, but he wanted to be king, right? And then you
Right.
have Mordecai, who had already proven himself to the king because on a separate occasion, he had actually saved the king, right? He had saved the king's life. And
Yeah.
thankfully, he was reminded of that. And that is really what kind of also turned the tide. And then you have Esther, who decided, I'm not going to sit quietly over here. I'm not going to be passive. Like you said, I'm not just going to be a little orphan girl who sits here. It's like I'm going to speak up. And I think in a climate right now where a lot of people are doing a lot of talking and a lot of people are making a lot of public opinions, we have to make sure that whatever we share or whatever we say is rooted in freedom, right? It's rooted in somebody's life coming out better. Like, we
Mm.
shouldn't be saying things that are going to make the flames worse, or that are going to fan the flames of persecution or oppression or hatred. We have to make sure that whatever we are saying is rooted not only in truth and not only in freedom, but also in the word. Because life or death is in the power of the tongue. And right now, we're all being held responsible for the things that we say or do. And we just have to be so careful. have to be so careful to not lose sight of the fact that we have our own privileges, and that with those privileges we have the ability to free people, or we have the ability to keep them oppressed. And so, yeah, like you just got to be smart.
Yeah, you said something earlier. I can't remember if it was on Facebook or Instagram. Where you said words have power, right? And they have meaning. And
Yeah,
just being mindful that when we do choose to use our platforms, speak, that we are mindful of the people that it will impact,
yeah,
right? Everything we do, believe it or not, is bigger than us.
hmm,
Everything we do, every choice we make impacts somebody else. As you said, all those three individuals are knitted together, right? They're entwined. Three different decisions,
yeah,
all affecting each other.
yeah,
So it is so incredibly important, like you said, in this time, for those of us who are in privileged positions to be careful and mindful of how we use our platforms, what we say, who it can hurt, and who it can help.
yeah.
I don't think that can be expressed enough,
Mm-mm.
right? We have to think before we type, think before we speak. Like we just have to be mindful.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I definitely, you was right. I said that last night. Words mean things, but it's also like who I am as a person. Anybody who knows me, like I love words. I love them. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is, but and I'm really not. I don't like to talk necessarily. I know it feels that way, but I don't. Um, and so I'm very careful. If you know me, you know I'm careful about the words that I say,
Hmm.
but the words that I do say, I always mean. And so, that comes with responsibility, because what that says is if somebody comes at me for something that I said, then I have to take full responsibility for saying it.
Yeah,
That's any of us, right? And so I think that in a time, like you said, where people are typing, they're speaking, they are whatever, it's just important to take a step back and think about what could this do. And I'm not saying that that's gonna, you know, convince you not to say it. What I'm
oh
just
yeah.
saying is just gut check, right?
Hmm.
Let it marinate a little bit in your spirit before it comes out.
Yeah,
And that's why the Bible says that we should be slow to speak. Because what happens when we speak too quickly, or we say something, or we do something too quickly, it has the opportunity to create trouble or drama or fires that we really don't want. And so, like you said, with what is it? With great, what is it? Great power comes great responsibility. I know
yeah.
I'm probably butchering
No,
the quote, but I think that that's important, because in my mind, all of us are leaders, right? Especially if you identify as a believer, you should know that you are a leader. People are watching you. They are listening to what you say. They're watching what you do. They want your actions to match what you speak. And so we have to be mindful, because there's also a group that we are battling, right? Principalities that are unseen, and there are worlds and systems that are against every single thing that anyone trying to do the right thing is out to
yeah,
do. And so when you give the enemy a foothold, girl, he gonna take a mile. And so really, just you just want to make sure that whenever you say whatever you say, that you can do so in good conscience, that you can do it truthfully, and that you can do it humbly. Because I think that's another thing. We talked about having privilege and what it means to be in the palace. And I think that, again, you know, when we get platforms, or we get to certain spaces or places in our lives, we often forget what it feels like to not be part of the people with the platform, or the people with a mic. And
hmm,
so in many ways, those of us with a mic have to remember that we're speaking still on the behalf of those who don't have one. And
yeah,
when that roots you, when you're anchored in that, you start to realize how powerful your words really are. And something that I'm grateful for, that, you know, like even being from Waynesboro, Burt County, like one thing that I'm always grateful for is like there's always a dose of humility that comes with being from there.
Oh
So
yeah.
even now that I have moved to literally across the country, I always hear like what people are going to think or say, or I think about that stuff because I want to always make my people proud, and I want them to know that I'm thinking of them, that I'm not so far removed from what's happening, even over there, you know, in small town Georgia. I want people to know that I still got your back, right? Like I'm hardly home, but I'm always repping. And I
Always
keep saying
repping.
always. And so again, you know, we just have to stay humbled. And if nothing else, I think that the reason this story turns out the way it does, with Esther going to the king, them folding Haman's little plot to kill all the Jews, is because Esther knew that Mordecai loved her, but
Hmm.
also that he loved his faith, and that, you know, again, she had been raised in his house. So, like I said, we could call him her godfather. They had a rapport. So she knew that he wasn't just going to ask her to do this selfishly. He was asking her because he knew that if, like we said, if anybody has the power to make this change, it's you. And I believe that we all need somebody in our lives around us who's pushing us and cheering us on, that doesn't need to be the face, but is okay with saying, Tori, this is yours. You supposed to do this. You know, Michelle, like this is what you're called to do. You need to do this. And so again, as we think about these three players in the story, each one has a part, and there's so much power that each one has. But I'm grateful that Esther took her power in this moment and used it to free her people. Because, like I said, friends, if you've never read the story, I would encourage you to keep reading on past chapter 4 and see what she was able to do. Because Sister Girl was bad. Like
So bad.
the way that she set up this situation to even expose Haman in the way that she did, right? It's
Finesse.
so
Finesse.
crazy. Finesse for sure. Cause yeah, like I don't know, maybe you want to talk a little bit about that. I know we're coming up to time, but if you want to talk a little bit about like how she did it, it just blows my mind.
Well, like I think it shows, just to highlight something, that before we do things, we need to have a plan, right? Like, so,
Yep.
well, two things rather. One is we can't be people who just say we're going to wait for God to do something. Like we're just going to pray and just He gonna do it. No, like he's
Mm-hmm.
endowed us to do it. And two, when we get
Yep.
ready to go do stuff, you got to have a plan, right? Like I think a lot of times we don't give, I don't want to say God enough credit or Christians enough credit in thinking like we have to think things all the way through. And Esther had a plan, right? It wasn't just I'm just gonna go out here and do this. It's like, no, we're gonna bring them
Yes.
in, make them feel special. Come on, and it was thoughtful. It was thought through. And so I think that goes back to what we was addressing earlier is, we can't just be out here doing stuff haphazardly. You have to have a plan. What is your plan? I always tell people when you're doing something, like, what are your action items? Like, what are you planning to
Mm-hmm.
accomplish? Right. So Esther was like, we're gonna set this up. We're gonna invite him over to come over to the king, make him feel special. And he went back like, oh, I'm it. I got invited at the king and Esther. So it was
Yep.
thoughtful, right? Esther was very thoughtful in how she went about doing it. And I think we have to remember that when we're doing stuff, to not just throw stuff together, like, because we see this, right? And this is not a hit at
Mm-hmm.
any organization or person, because I'm guilty. I'm just going to go do it. You have
Me
to
too.
have a plan. You need to be thoughtful. Like, God has even allowed us to be shrewd in a positive way, right? You have to have a plan, right? And so what I always ask people, and Nakia and I, we're talking to people, is like, what is your plan? And as people of God, we should not just go into stuff haphazardly. We need a
Yeah.
plan, Michelle.
Yeah. Yeah. We definitely need a plan. And what I love about Esther's plan is that it to your point, it had action items. she wasn't just like busting into the king's court like, hey, Haman is trying to kill the Jews. It had steps. The first
Right.
thing was, I want to bring Haman to dinner with us, right? And then honestly, Xerxes, who had no idea, which to me is so funny, how he asks about, about how he would reward someone who was of noble character in the land, not even realize that he wasn't talking about him, he was talking about Mordecai. There's just so many things. And the way that God weaved into the story with, keeping the king up at night and making him want to go back and read the records so he'd be reminded of what Mordecai did. And then seeing how embarrassed Haman was when he had to parade Mordecai around the city. Like, it's just the way that it kind of unfolded in his lap to me is, and like people talk all the time about the Bible and, like, oh, the Bible's boring. But this story right here got all the drama. It almost like needs to be a show because it's so funny the way that Haman exposes himself. And I think note is that oftentimes when we are called to action, we go into these situations thinking that we have to, or that our only goal is to expose what's wrong. And what we have to know is that that's not always the case. Sometimes your goal is to go in, free your people, and get out. God does everything else. When we talk about making our enemies our footstool, it's not about you, it's about God doing that. So while you are distracted trying to make other folks look bad, you are missing your assignment. So focus on what your assignment is and let God reveal the ill intent or whatever these other folks got going on. I think we get so caught up in trying to make other people look bad, good, that we stumble, and then God has to humble us because we didn't pay attention to what we were supposed to do in the first place. God was like, go save the people, not expose this person, because that's gonna happen anyway, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, going back, like we said, the power of one, and you can decide for yourself what your power is and how you use it. But our hope is that you decide to use it for good and that you not be distracted by all the things that are going wrong or that could go wrong, but that you are so tied to your assignment and accomplishing that you can't even hear the noise. You can't hear it.
Yeah. Um,
Go
just
ahead.
something to add. I know we talked about platforms and being in positions of privilege, and a lot of people might be hearing this and going, I don't have a platform. I think you said this one time in one of our lives. If you have a Facebook page, you have a platform. You write in
Yeah.
the status, you have a platform. People are listening to you. Wherever you at or on wherever your position or whatever your position is on your job, you have a platform. I think a lot of times we pray and we think that God is going to give us this big center stage when He's looking to use us in everyday small things, right? Speaking up for the little person on your job. That's huge. That has
Huge.
tremendous impact, right? Small stuff. Like I think we get caught up in the lights and wanting to be seen. And and it's not even about that. And if you do the small stuff, it's like practice, right?
Yes.
If you perform well in practice,
Yes.
God is going to give you an opportunity to be on a big stage to be seen, but you got to get it right in practice. And we're missing it every day in our families and at our where we work and in our small surroundings. Like we're missing it, Michelle. And I'm saying that as a person who at one point I was missing it, right? I really was. I'm thinking like, God, I got to be in this big position to do
Yeah.
great things for you. And He's like, no, I can use you right where you are,
Me and you both, girl.
right where you are. So I don't want anyone who's listening to this or who will hear this and think, I don't have a platform. Yes, you do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important to note, not only do you have a platform, but you can make baby steps. Baby steps are still steps. Like, don't think you got to go from wherever you are to Oprah in a day. That's not how it happens. In fact, the Bible tells us, like, I'll I'll I will make you a steward of much, but I need you to be a good steward of this little bit. And
Yeah.
the little bit is that seemingly small platform you think you have, or the opportunity to speak up for somebody on your job, or somebody in your church, or somebody in your neighborhood, for you to go to a protest and lend your voice, or for you to offer a skill to an organization that you know might need it. Those are all small steps. And I think what happens is we get so caught up in us, on us having, like you said, all the right, we need all the tools. I need all the tools. I need to see the full picture, Lord. Show it all to me. And God's like, didn't I tell you to just go? It's like we have to realize that as we move, He provides. But He's not going to provide it all if you're standing still. So as you move your feet, God will drop, this or that. I even remember, we could use ourselves, for example, when Tori and I first kicked off, when we first kicked off Faith First this year, earlier this year, like our quarantine edition, I guess you could say. And we were thinking about, trying to do this live Bible study. And then what did God do? Nakia sent us StreamYard. Minister Nakia sent us StreamYard. You know what I mean? So it's like,
Yeah.
once you start, God fills in the gaps. But if you are stagnant, He can't do anything. And so when you move, God moves with you. It reminds me of the children of Israel when they were set free from Egypt, but they hadn't yet made it to the promised land, and the cloud followed them. And the cloud gave go. It was like it was directing them by day and by night. In the same way, the way that they were provided manna, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it might not be the end product, but if you move towards the direction, if you go the direction toward what God is calling you to, He will give you everything else you need. But you got to move first. You got to move your feet. And so I would just encourage you that if you are feeling like in this season, it's very easy to feel helpless.
Mm-hmm.
In this season, I know it. I know that feeling because I felt it. I felt helpless. I
Yeah.
felt like there's nothing I can do to help. I felt like there's nothing my voice can do. I don't have the finances to, bail people out of jail. I just don't have the demeanor to go out and protest. You know what I mean? So like I'm thinking, where do I fit in? And God is like, what are you doing? How are you encouraging people? That helps. How are you educating people? That helps. Are you making
Yeah.
phone calls? Are you making emails? What are you doing? There is enough to be done for all of us to do something. All of us should have one thing on our list that we can do. And maybe it's just exploring how you set up your LLC. Maybe it's I'm going to create a space in my home that's dedicated to me working on my business. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's I need to do something that guarantees my kids will be okay when I leave this earth. You know what I mean? There are so many things for us to do, but we get caught up in the how and the why, God, instead of the go.
Mm.
Just go. Start somewhere and let Him fill in all the rest of those gaps, y'all. I can guarantee you that most of the people who have built empires didn't do it on their own. Not only did they not do it on their own, they didn't do it in a day. So be patient with yourself,
Yeah.
give yourself grace, know, trust, and understand that you have power in this time. We said the power of one. We need you to move though. Don't just mourn. Don't just sit at home taking in all this news, watching these videos of these people dying or whatever it is that you're doing. Don't just do that. We need you to move. And we need you to be intentional with the way that you move, right?
Yeah.
You have power, friends. You do. And you might hear this and you might be like, they're not talking to me. No, we are talking to you.
He's talking to you.
You have power. Tori, you want to close us out?
No, I mean, I think what you said was powerful, Michelle. Like God is a gap filler. That's what He does. He fills in the gaps. And
Master.
and once you realize that it's not you that's running the show, it's not you that's making it happen, it becomes a lot easier to lean and depend on him. A lot easier to move instead of just
Yeah.
mourning. A lot easier to get things done. We are definitely living in um, perilous times, right? It's emotional, uh,
Yeah.
overwhelming to say the least sometimes, as you said. But to know, we hope that you hear this and you are encouraged to know that you have the power to make a
Mhm.
difference, even if it's just taking one kid and mentoring that one child. Like you said, you don't have the resources to mentor 100 or 40 or 50. You can do one.
Yeah.
So take what you have, work with what you got, and God will give the increase. He'll make it happen. But you definitely have been empowered by God through God to make a change.
Mhm.
And once you realize that your one voice could save or change the world, your one decision to do something positive, to stand up for somebody, to use your voice, to lend your resources, we will collectively change our world. We will
Yes.
change. We will set it on path for generations to come. Because we've seen it done before. We've seen it
Mhm.
done before us, right? So what makes them any different? I'll say this, and I promise you I'll stop, Michelle. T.D.
Sure,
Jakes
go
says
ahead.
this. Bishop Jakes, our bishop, he says this, right? That everything he has, we have. You got two eyes, we have two eyes. You got two ears, we got two ears. There's nothing really any different from him or anybody who's doing what we deem to be great work different from us, other than their willingness to move. So we hope that when you hear this, that you will move. You will use whatever platform, whatever voice, whatever resources you have, whatever position you're in, and move.
Yeah. So good. I'm not even gonna say anything else because that was the perfect exit. We hope you move. Um, Thank you all as always for joining us. We appreciate y'all. We love you guys. We are praying for you. I know that these are hard times. We know that there is a lot going on. There's lots of articles to read, lots of news stories to watch. But we hope that in these times, you don't just make time for the noise, but you make time for the word, that you spend time with God, however you do that you find some scriptures, hold them tightly, read them every day. We hope that you are subscribing and listening and reading our newsletters, that you know it's a lot. But thankfully, our Lord and Savior has overcome the world, which means that we don't have to worry so much about what happens here. It's about how we pattern our lives to live our best lives while we're here. And so I just want to encourage you, stay prayed up. Please take care of yourselves physically and spiritually because both are important.
Mm.
Make sure you're wearing a mask, wash your hands, all that stuff. COVID is still a thing. I know that we think it's not, but it is. So just take care of yourselves and take care of each other. We have our Friday prayer call happening this Friday at 12 noon Eastern, so 12 p.m. Eastern time, 9 a.m. Pacific time. We do have a so if you need the number, reach out to Tori or myself, or just join our Facebook group, and we'll make sure to get you that information. Love y'all. We appreciate y'all. Tune in next week.